No,
Today we're going to
I may
learn
have to
about
go back
Yachatz. What
outside.
exactly is Yachatz? Yachatz is when we break the middle matzah. We save the bigger half for later on in the Seder for afikomen. It's an old story. We know the drill. That's what Yachatz is. But what we don't know necessarily is what on earth are we doing over here? The Ashkenaz custom is to break the matzah in half, the middle matzah. It's interesting to point out that the Svardim, they actually have a minog to break the matzah and they shape it in a way of a dalet and a yud. One time, someone Sephardi tried explaining this to me, but this is well beyond my comprehension for someone who's been Ashkenaz his entire life and many generations of Ashkenaz. It's not that complicated, but I'm Ashkenaz, so it doesn't apply to me. But the point is what? So during Yachatz, what do? So we break the middle matzah, we save the bigger piece for the afikomen. Now the three matzahs over here correspond to Kohen, Levi, and Yisroel. The top matzah corresponds to the Kohen. The middle matzah corresponds to the Levi. The bottom matzah corresponds to the Yisrael. So we have Kohen at the top, then Levi, then Yisrael. Now, based on this information, the question arises, why do we specifically break the middle matzah, aka the Levi? What is the significance behind, quote, breaking the Levi? What is this all about? What is going on over here? Fine. Now, we should just point out as a side point that the question as to why we, so to say, steal the afikomen, grab the afikomen, that is another discussion in and of itself, which we're not discussing. Right now, we are discussing a Yachatz question, which is why do we break the middle matzah, aka Levi? That's what we're discussing. The afikomen, that's really more of an afikomen, safun. Right now, we're on Yachatz. Okay, so now let's delve into this a little bit more to get a proper understanding of the matter. We are going to suggest three answers to this, and if anyone knows of any more answers after, then please share them. But based on the minimal research that I've done, these are the following answers that are worthwhile to present. It was decreed in the bris habisarim with Avraham. Take a look in Berashis Perek Tez Zayin, where Hashem basically spoke to Avram and said, okay, this is what's going to happen over here in the future. Now, it was decreed that the Jews were going to be slaves and subjugated. The pasuk actually specifies that the Jews were going to be strangers. If you want to look at the pasuk, Tez Zayin Yud Gimel, go back to Berashis. So the pasuk specifies that the Jews will be strangers, slaves, and afflicted in a foreign land. AKA sounds like the exile of Egypt, the Golus of Egypt, of Mitzrayim. Okay. Now, akoponim, so now Rashi over there says that what? Rashi over there says in Shemos, actually, Rashi in Shemos in the Hey Dalid. Rashi writes that the tribe of Levi never worked in Egypt. Now, this is fascinating. So, comes out that the Leviyim only underwent one third of the decree. Remember, because there's a triple play over here, aka that they were going to be strangers, slaves, and afflicted in a foreign land. Comes out that now that they only were strangers. They were never afflicted because they didn't work, right? And also, they were never slaves, right? So they weren't afflicted and they weren't slaves. So they were only strangers. Comes out with this, we could explain why the Leviyim, right? Um, they weren't slaves or afflicted, but now we could explain why we break specifically the middle matzah, right? We break the middle matzah and we leave a small amount. This alludes to the Leviyim were strangers. They were still part of that aspect of the decree. In other words, why we break a little bit, we save a larger amount for later. Why is that? The reason is because the small amount of matzah symbolizes on a deeper level that the Leviyim, they were just left with just a little bit now. AKA, they were just strangers when they were in the land. They weren't slaves and they weren't afflicted. They were just part of the small aspect of the decree. But the bigger portion of the matzah, which represents and corresponds to the slavery and the affliction, which was never decreed on the tribe of Levi, that's removed from the table when we say the Haggadah. We don't say phrases and statements over this part of over this matzah because the larger part of the matzah symbolizes on a deeper level aspects of the decree that the Leviyim were a part of, aka being afflicted and having to be slaves. This idea is quoted in the Tali Oros on Haggadah on page 50, page 9. This is one approach as to why the Leviyim, why we break the middle matzah, which is Levi, and we have the smaller piece with us now, because it alludes to how Levi weren't slaves and they weren't afflicted. I just saw a very nice mimer in the Yareach LaMoadim, actually. I'm going to summarize it in 30 seconds. And this is the idea that he writes about in other places as well. I'm not sure exactly where. This is 6 pages he has on this. What he basically is coming from is how Yisroel wasn't able to partake in Matan Torah, perhaps also the Erev Rav, because only someone who was afflicted in Egypt and was a slave then became purified and ready to receive the Torah. How then was Levi? How then was Levi allowed to partake in the revelation at Mount Sinai, Matan Torah? So he basically says that their learning Torah is considered that they had to exert themselves, so to say, and therefore they had to work for the Torah also, which is an amazing pshat. Okay. Questions, comments on that first answer?
Yeah, the Kohanim were Leviyim too.
Yeah, they were Leviyim, but Lamaisa, we have 3 groups. So
why do we steal the afikomen?
yeah, like I said, that is another discussion of itself. Right now we are dealing with why we break the middle matzah. If we have more time today, we could do it today. If not, we'll tackle it next year. But I certainly have it in the 180 pages of notes that I have typed up. I have a big section on that. Actually, I feel like we learned that. It's probably on rabbiblond.com somewhere.
There are a couple of reasons.
What'd you say?
There are a couple of reasons for stealing the afikomen, yeah.
Yeah, many reasons. Many reasons. Maybe we'll cover that in short since you asked so nicely. Okay, let's finish what we're doing over here now. Reason number 2 is from someone by the Sefer of Sidkas Yosef on page 317, Rabbi Yosef Leifer. You know, the Shulchan Aruch says that you break the matzah in 2. This is in Tafayin Gimel Sefav. We save half of the matzah, aka the bigger half for the afikomen. Now, it's clear from the Shmos Rabbah, this is if you want to look it up, in Yud Beis Chaf Aleph, that the Korban Pesach separated the Jews from the idolatry that they worshipped. In fact, it says in the Yalkut Shimoni, in Parshas B'Shalach, in Shin Lamed Dalid, that right before the Yam Suf, the Red Sea split, the Sea of Reeds, the officer of the sea, he claimed that the Jews weren't worthy for this miracle of the sea splitting. Well-known idea, halalu avodah avodah zarah, halalu avdi avodah zarah. He said, what's the difference between the Jews and the Egyptians? They're so stooped and involved with idolatry. They sunk so low, they're not worthy. And as we know, subsequently they worshipped the Chet Egel, the golden calf. The Leviyim didn't. The Leviyim had complete belief in Hashem, and they in fact remained loyal. This is in Shmos Lamed Beis Chavav. The middle matzah corresponds to the tribe of Levi. Actually, the Ber Hativ says this. If you want to see it inside in Simin Tafayin Gimel Os Ches in the Ber Hativ. Now, the Shulchan Aruch teaches us that the afikomen commemorates the Korban Pesach. This is in Simin Tafayin Zayin Sif Aleph. With this technical information, we can now understand why specifically we break the middle matzah, which corresponds to the tribe of Levi. The breaking of the matzah symbolizes that the tribe of Levi broke away from the other tribes, and they didn't worship the idolatry. So therefore, it's fitting to designate the afikomen, which commemorates the Korban Pesach, which separates the Jews from the idolatry that they worshipped.
Hmm.
to the Leviyim because they didn't sin. That's another reason that we break the middle matzah, the Levi, because they separated and they weren't involved with the idolatry. So too we have so far we have two reasons. Reason number one, to recap, is they were only strangers, but they weren't slaves and afflicted. So they only had part of it. Reason two, they broke away from idolatry. Reason three, and this is my most favorite. This is him quoting another answer. The three matzahs, some say, correspond to the three avos, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Yitzchak is the middle matzah. Why are we breaking the middle matzah? There's a Gemara in Masechet Shabbos on Pei Tes Amud Beis that teaches us, relates a conversation between Hashem and others by darshaning, expounding on a pasuk in Yeshaya. Pasuk in Yeshaya says that and says that in the future, Hashem's gonna tell Avram, "Banecha chatu, your children have sinned." Avram will say, "You should erase them in order to sanctify your name." Hashem says, "Let me tell Yaakov, because Yaakov, what's the story over here? He who went the difficulty of Sar Gidol Banim, raising children. Maybe he'll ask for mercy on their behalf." Yaakov responded like Avram. Hashem said to Yitzchak, "Your children have sinned." Yitzchak responded, "They're only your children? They're only my children? Excuse me, they're not your children? What about Nasav and Ishma? They said we're going to do them, we're going to listen. You called them," Yitzchak said to Hashem, "my firstborn." Furthermore, how much did they actually sin? Let's say someone lives for 70 years. Like we say in Pesukah de Zimra on Shabbos. Let's say someone lives for a duration of 60 years. Slash the first 20 years off of his life. You don't punish for that. Subtract another 25 years, people are sleeping. Subtract or deduct the debits and the credits. Deduct another 12 and a half years for davening, eating, restroom. So out of 70 years of a person's life, you only have 12 and a half years left. If you handle it, says Yitzchak to Hashem, good. If not, then this is the key line. Palga alai, upalga alecha. Half on me and half on you. We're going to split it. Take a look at the Gemara inside for all the details. The point is, based on this Gemara, we could explain why we break the matzah of Yitzchak. Yitzchak was the one who said, "Half on me and half on you, Hashem." Yitzchak defended the sinful Jewish nation. We are begging Hashem by saying that no matter how much we sinned, look at the Mesiras Nefesh of Yitzchak. Look at the self-sacrifice that Yitzchak exemplified. We use this matzah as a tactic that attempts and will hopefully save us from bad. Rav Chaim Shapiro has a different twist on this in the Shar Yisachar, in the Mamri Haggadah, the Pischa, Osios Dalet Tehei, and he says a little different. Many mitzvahs that we perform on the night of the Seder commemorate the redemption from Egypt. And these mitzvahs also allude to the Geula HaSida, the future redemption. Just like Yitzchak defended the Jews in the past, so too he's going to defend the Jews during Ikvasa de Mashiach, this final redemption that we're in, when we're on the heels of Mashiach coming. The gematria of Lechem Oni equals what? 208.
78.
How do we get that? Lamed, 30. Ches, 8. Mem, 40. Ayin, 70. Nun, 50. Yud is 10. Add it all together, you get 208. The gematria of Yitzchak is what? 208.
208.
The middle matzah, Yitzchak, let's go over it together. The Yud is 10. The Sadi is 90. The Ches is 8. The Kuf is 100. 208, the gematria of Lechem Oni is equivalent to Yitzchak, the middle matzah. Yitzchak's matzah is considered the poor man's bread because it's broken. It all makes
Lechem Without a vav, right?
Yeah, without a vav. It all makes sense now why we break the middle matzah. Easily understandable. It's all Yitzchak. Makes sense now. It's all Yitzchak over here. That's why we break the middle matzah. Why do we break the matzah though? Just come to the Seder with two broken matzahs. We gotta put on a whole show over here. Okay, maybe for the kids you could say. Step shot over here. The Dubna Magid, he explains Kedarko by means of a parable, a mashal. Mashal mahadavadoma. It's a story. What is it similar to? In a certain city, there lived a wealthy wholesale merchant. He owned a large warehouse. What happened? Shopkeepers, they would come from all over the surrounding villages to buy merchandise from him in order to resell it at their hometowns. We know you buy in quantity, you get bigger deals. It's the whole idea when it comes to Walmart. It's all chachma that they do, and then you resell it. One day, two shopkeepers, they came in to stack up their stores. The workers in the warehouse, they helped them.
Yeah.
Fill their wagons with whatever they needed.
I just got.
Merchants were finished. What? When the merchants were finished.
Sorry,
When the merchants were finished, they went up to the owner to pay their bills. The first merchant, he tallied up all of his merchandise. The total came out to be 1,200. He pulled out 600 cash from his pocket, and he asked if he could take the rest on credit. It's 600 cash. Let me get the rest on credit. So what happened? The owner agreed. Immediately after, the second shopkeeper, whose bill came to the approximate same amount, said, "Can I please have the merchandise on credit?" Let me get it on credit. So, what happened? The owner said no. The merchant said, "Why not? My friend, just got it on credit also." The owner explained, "Your friend, he had the 600 in cash. He had the down payment. So it's assumed he's going to pay the rest. Down payment, 30-year fixed mortgage. He'll pay the rest." I'm like, you've got squat. You're just showing me a little card. The main point of the Seder night, explains the Dibna Magid, is to instill and inject emunah. We have to inject belief of Hashem and that He runs the show and everything in this world. The matzah that we break symbolizes the redemption, both from Egypt and the current exile that we're in. It has a double symbolism to it. That's the matzah. The first half symbolizes the redemption from Egypt, which our ancestors have passed down throughout the generations. So we eat half in order to re-experience this right away. This gives us the emunah, the belief that we will soon experience the final redemption with the coming of Mashiach, which is symbolized by the second half of the matzah, which is eaten at the end of the Seder. In other words, we break the matzah because when we break it, it's considered like a down payment. It's considered that we have some collateral to show, so to say. And when we immediately re-experience that belief in Hashem, that He caused the redemption, And then we know that the future redemption will surely occur. That's the bigger matzah. That's what I got on Yachatz. Any questions or comments or additional ideas?
So again, it's just the Yitzchak one that so because Yitzchak, the quote was the pasuk he said there. That was it, because he said half to me, half to you.
Right, that's
Oh,
the
there it is.
Gemara.
Okay.
And he was
Yeah, I see it. Okay.
he was willing to take the credit and defend the Jews. He was willing to defend the Jews. And even though that they sinned, so we try to use that tactic and say, look, no matter how much we sinned, we're like Yitzchak over here. Look at the self-sacrifice that we exemplify. The Mesiras Nefesh. We use this matzah as a tactic to say, Hashem, remember what Yitzchak did? They didn't sin too much. And that will hopefully bring the Geula as well. That's why the Yitzchak and Lechemoni is the same gematria, poor man's bread. It's going to defend us for the future redemption. So just to recap what we did, we discussed a few ideas when it comes to Yachatz. We discussed one idea, Levi, why we break the middle matzah, because they weren't involved with the slavery and with the affliction. We discussed also a second answer, provided a second answer, that they broke away from other tribes by not doing the idolatry. That was Levi. And then the Yitzchak answer that we just discussed, and then by breaking the matzah in general, because it's used as like a down payment, so to say. Good?
Yes.